Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. We're going to get into the offseason, what Kansas City needs to do to look at going forward and trying to get back to the Super Bowl today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
And welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs. I am your host, Chris Clark. There is a lot to talk about with Kansas City and how they are going to go about this season and how they're going to get back to where they can compete in the Super Bowl again in 2025. This is Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. I'm your host, Chris Clark. You can find me on X at Chris Clark NFL, and I am also the founder of Chiefs Corner. You can go find a lot of information there. I'm going to be doing some mock drafts very shortly and getting into the salary cap, what the Chiefs can do to get ready for this season, this offseason, to get ready for 2025. We've already moved past where we were in 2024, past the Super Bowl, and at this point, we need to get to talking about 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet. Go check out FanDuel right now. A little bit later, we're going to talk about some potential free agents that could possibly fit in Kansas City. But before that, we're going to get into the salary cap creation for 2025. But we're going to start right now talking about the roster needs and looking at the free agency and what Kansas City has in store and what they could possibly do in free agency and who they have that are going to be free agents. There is a lot of different names. But before I get there, I want to thank all of our locos. Go check it out at 816-357-8781. Insider information. It is going to be coming to you on that text line. That's, again, 816-357-8781. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week. I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth on the different players that Kansas City has as free agents right now. Like I said, it is a very, very long list. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to go in reverse age order of the free agents that they have. They re-signed Baylor Cupp to their practice squad or to their 90-man roster. He is going to be on the roster. He is the only person that they've re-signed to at this point. So he is going to be back in 2025. Nick Bolton heads the list at 25 years old, along with Matt Ariza. Both of them are free agents. Ariza is only an exclusive rights free agent, which means that Kansas City is likely to bring him back on a very cheap deal, probably around $1 million, maybe a little bit more than that. We'll see. And I'll have that information for you as soon as we get it. Nick Bolton is going to be the big question mark at 25 years old. He is going to command a top contract. If he wants to stay in Kansas City, he's not going to be able to get that type of contract in Kansas City. It's going to be very expensive, and it will be very prohibitive for the Chiefs in free agency if they decide to keep him. He has been a cornerstone of this defense, so it's not going to shock me if they do. But he's not going to be able to get, I don't think, top linebacker money, which is close to $20 million a year. I also don't think that is something that this team needs to be investing into him. At this point, then you get into the 26-year-olds. You have Marlon Tuipulotu, Peyton Hendershot, Jack Cochran, Trey Smith, Spencer Schrader. Those are your free agents that are 26 years old. Marlon may be back. It would be a depth signing and could easily make it onto the 90-man roster. Peyton Hendershot would not surprise me if he's back. He's a restricted free agent along with Jack Cochran, so I expect both those guys to be back. The one that's interesting to me on this one is Spencer Schrader, and I say that because I'm looking at the situation from the Chiefs' perspective. I do think that there's a chance that Butker needs some kind of surgery on his leg and maybe could be out a couple of months if he has that surgery. So to me, it's possible that they decide, okay, well, this would give us a camp leg that we could come bring in, and he could take Butker's spot until Butker is healthy in, when you get to training camp. But this would give them something to work in OTAs in that way. So it would not shock me. He's an exclusive rights free agent, and they kept him on the injured reserve list. So that tells me that there's probably a little bit of interest there to at least keep him and consider keeping him for the future and for this year. So, or at least going into training camp. Jack Cochran, I would expect, is going to be back on a restricted free agent deal. Same with Peyton Hendershot. I would expect both those guys back. Trey Smith is going to be the big one, and we talked about this on Friday. It just comes down to numbers. What does he want? Does he want top of the guard money? Because if he does, then he's going to get $20 million a year, and I don't think he's in Kansas City. It would not shock me to see the attack and trade for Trey Smith. I do think that that's probably really the only realistic scenario if Kansas City has of getting any kind of value for him and him getting anywhere near the top of the market money. But that's going to be difficult for him and this organization. I do think that he still wants to play in Kansas City and he wants to play with Creed Humphrey next to him. If he does want that, then he's going to have to take less money. We will see if he will be willing to do that. When we keep going down the list, you got Josh Uche, Tershawn Wharton, McCole Hardman, Keith Taylor, Najee Johnson are all 27 years old. I don't see Uche coming back. He didn't have any real value to Kansas City throughout the season. They didn't do anything after trading for him. Tershawn Wharton, I think, is going to get a payday elsewhere. I think that he's going to be a guy that they want maybe to come back, but I don't think that he's going to be somebody that they can afford. I didn't think they'd be able to afford Mike Dana, though, so we'll see whether or not they can bring Tershawn Wharton back on a relatively decent deal. McCole Hardman was on a UFA deal for only $1.1 million. I think if he wants that kind of deal, he could come and get it in Kansas City. I don't think he's going to get an offer elsewhere. Didn't do much this season and got injured and wasn't able to stay healthy in the playoffs. So I can't imagine that it's going to be a big deal if he comes back. Keith Taylor and Najee Johnson both being 27 surprises me. Both of them are restricted free agents. Something to watch there with what they do with Najee Johnson. They did draft him. Keith Taylor's been in the league for a couple of years. I would not be surprised if one of them or both of them are back in 2025 as restricted free agents. They could be kept for pretty cheap at this point. This is where it's going to get really interesting. You start getting into some bigger names: Justin Reed, Charles Omenihu, Marquise Brown, Malik Herring, and Mike Caliendo, all 28 years old. Let's start with Herring. I would not be surprised if he's back. He's on an RFA deal. So I would imagine that's going to be a really cheap deal. Generally, all the RFA deals that we have talked about are either seventh round picks or undrafted free agents. So it's not going to cost the team to sign them. But generally speaking, they're not going to get big deals. Mike Caliendo is the only exclusive rights free agent, so I would be surprised if they didn't bring him back. His salary is only $915,000 in 2024, so I would expect he's back for a cheap salary, and we'll keep him around to continue to help with the interior of the offensive line. Charles Omenihu and Marquise Brown, I think Hollywood has a chance to come back. Omenihu is going to want money, and I don't know that Kansas City is going to be the place he's going to get it. Is it possible he's back in Kansas City? Yes. He said that he wants Travis Kelce to come back, so it sounds like he wants to be here. The question is he going to get paid somewhere else to play? He was only paid $8 million a year. That was a pretty cheap deal for Kansas City. And Justin Reed, I'd be really surprised if they bring him back, not necessarily because of the player, but because of the position and what they've invested in it lately. You have Chamari Connor, you have Jaden Hicks, you have Brian Cook. All three of those guys were drafted. So I do think that it's quite possible that Justin Reed has played his last down in Kansas City. Then you get into some older players. You get Derek Nottie, Justin Watson, and Juju Smith-Schuster. To me, I think all the three of those guys could be brought back on cheap deals. None of them were here for more than $2 million a year, and if they want to come back for something like that, they could easily do that. Samaje Perine, Kareem Hunt, Jody Fortson, and G.J. Humphries. I don't know that any of those guys are back. Hunt kind of lost his his ability his explosion down the stretch. And he didn't have much to begin with. He's 30 years old, so is Samaje Perine. If they want either of those guys back, I'm sure that they would come back on a cheap deal. They were both under $1.5 million. Then you get into DeAndre Hopkins and Carson Wentz, and then Mike Pennell and James Winchester. DeAndre Hopkins, again, I don't think he's going to be getting a big deal elsewhere. Could he be back in Kansas City? Yes. Do I expect it? No, not really. Mainly because he's a household name, and I would expect he's going to go and try to get a big deal elsewhere, and I don't think Kansas City can afford to pay him. I do think that Carson Wentz will be back as the backup quarterback. They only paid him $2.5 million in 2024. I think that that's probably about what the going rate is, and it would not shock me to see him back in 2025. Pennell's another guy. Could be back this year. He was a starter down the stretch, so they still liked what he was bringing. But they need to get younger at the position, so it would also not shock me if he's not back. And James Winchester, I would expect to be back in Kansas City and be the long snapper for this team going forward. And when we get back, I'm going to talk about the salary cap creation, how they can create some salary cap space, and what it looks like right now for this Chiefs roster headed into the 2025 season. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the NFL. Don't forget to check out Locked On NFL or any of the other Locked On podcasts. We have all of your teams covered on this Locked On Podcast Network. It is awesome. I really enjoy being able to listen to other teams' experts about talking about all the different sports teams that are out there, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, all of it is out there. NHL is out there as well. Go check out your favorite team on the Locked On Sports Podcast Network. All right, breaking down the salary cap gets a little bit trickier for Kansas City because this is a scenario where they don't have a ton of cap space going into 2025 right now. It's obvious that there are a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made over the next couple of weeks, and they have pretty much a set deadline with Travis Kelce to decide whether or not he's going to retire. If he retires, that'll free up a lot of cap space. I do expect that they will have the answer by the time that they are wanting their answer. I would hope that they would have it before that. So we'll see what happens with Travis Kelce and whether or not he decides he's going to play this year or if he's going to retire. But looking at this right now, Kansas City is sitting in around just under $1 million in cap space in 2025. That is not enough to do anything. They don't have enough to sign their draft class, which obviously we're not even talking about the NFL draft right now, but that's going to be something that they have to get taken care of as well. Usually it takes about $2 to $3 million, especially with where they're going to draft. And considering how few picks they'll have this year, it's going to cost them probably about $2 to $3 million to sign their draft picks in 2025. So they'll have to have that. And the other thing that is going on right now is currently the active roster is at 50 players because there's only 50 players on it. And right now, in this time of the year, you only account for the top 51. So they can add as many players as they want that will be under that top 51. And they could add one more player, which would get them to just basically zero in salary cap space. And then everybody else could be, those lower level players as well, because those lower level players are getting $840,000 a year. So they could add a whole bunch of those types of players. What can they do when it comes to free agency? What can they do when it comes to re-signing their own guys? That's where it gets even more tricky. You look at this roster and you look at the biggest numbers on salary cap, and it's obvious that it comes from Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes. Those are the two easiest ones to make differences on. Patrick Mahomes has a number of $66 million in cap space in 2025. Chris Jones has a salary cap number of almost $35 million. I would almost bet my entire check for this month that neither of those guys will be playing under those salary cap numbers in 2025. Patrick Mahomes, I guarantee you he's not going to play on $66 million. Chris Jones is the one that's a little bit questionable because of his age. Do they want to move money around on him, or do they want to keep it where it is because they don't want to balloon his cap number in future years? I still think that they make a move there, and that's going to make some adjustments happen. So we'll see what happens there. But you look at the other players. Talked about Travis Kelce a second ago, $19.8 million for a cap number. If he retires, it frees up $17.25 million. So we know that right now he hasn't decided. He's made enough money in his career. It's obviously not going to be about the money. It's, does he want to play? Does he have the desire? Does he have the love of the game still to continue playing at his age in the NFL? I think he does. But he needs to get away from it for a little bit. And as he said on his own on the New Heights podcast. It's because they have played so many games over the last 3 seasons, going to 3 Super Bowls in a row. They've usually played 2 or 3 games more than just about any other team in the NFL because of how many games they play going to the Super Bowl every single year. So it takes a huge wear and tear on their body, and I do think that that's also part of what you saw in the Super Bowl is wear and tear on the body and wear and tear just in the organization in general. So Travis Kelce would free up 17.25. That would get you probably enough salary cap space to operate. Would get you a draft class sign and maybe able to sign 1 or 2 free agents just with Travis Kelce retiring. Now, obviously, I don't want to see that, but it's possible it's going to happen. So that's 17.25 right there. If they restructure Patrick Mahomes, I would guess his salary cap number is going to drop from 66 to anywhere between 35 and $45 million a year. So I would think that you could easily free up $20 to $30 million right there. But that's the question is, what do you want to do with this roster? How do you want to change it? How do you want to attack and go forward? The nice thing is when you start looking at some of the free agents that we can talk about in the next segments, you're going to be talking about situations where they're going to be signing very, very small base salaries in year one. And the only other thing on their cap number is going to be their bonus proration. So unless you're paying somebody, $50 million, your salary cap number is going to be under 10 million or close to 10 million, because you can take your salary, you can take your bonus, and it's a bonus. That's, to be very clear, it's a salary cap bonus, a signing bonus in year one. It would be $50 million would go to $10 million a year over 5 years. So that would make, most of the players' cap numbers at that rate be about 11.5 million for the year. So anybody that you're signing for less than that, you're going to get back salary cap space. I do think that it's possible they make some big moves. I do think that it's possible that they are looking at fixing the offensive line, which is definitely something that they need to take a look at. Trey Smith is going to be a big key. Can they keep him in Kansas City? We'll see. But the other problem they run into right now is that you have, when you look at their roster and you look at their salary cap, they have their top 6 players are Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, Juwan Taylor, Joe Thuney, Travis Kelce, and Creed Humphrey. What are 3 of those 6? Offensive linemen. That's a problem. And Creed Humphrey's salary cap number is only, $10.7, $10.8 million for 2025. So it's relatively low, but you have 4 guys that are on this roster that take up $66 million in Mahomes, $35 million in Jones, and Juwan Taylor's 27.4, and Joe Thuney is 27 million. So you're sitting here looking at taking up easily over $150 million in 4 players. And then if you add in Travis Kelce there, you're looking at 170, 180 million almost. When you add in Creed Humphrey, and the salary cap total is 274. That's where the problem is it's at the top. They're going to have to get that figured out. So I do think that they have some ways to make some moves. The problem with Juwan Taylor is you can't do anything with his contract. You can reduce it, you can spread it out, but he only has 1 more year left, so it's just going to balloon next year. When he doesn't have any guaranteed money left on his deal, he does have $20 million guaranteed in 2025. I apologize. So I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to do anything with his number. But the other big one is, can they get Thuney extended? Are they going to try to sign Thuney to an extension? If they could sign him to an extension, they could bring his salary cap number down from 26 million or 27 million to maybe something closer to 15 to 16 million. And that would be a lot better than what they've got right now. We talked about this last week. Void years is something that I don't think that they really want to start doing, but the only way to really spread out Thuney's cap hit would be to use void years. If you want to give him an extension, you could do that. I don't think that they really want to do that, but we'll see. That's kind of how they can create cap space. They can do it easily with the top 5 players. They could easily get to 60, 75, maybe even $80 million in cap space, depending on what they want to do, if they want to go that direction. I don't expect that they're going to go that high. I do think that what they're going to look at is they're going to probably say, okay, who do we think that we want to go after? And we're going to talk about some of the free agents that the Chiefs could go after in this next segment. But I do think that they're going to need to figure it out with Patrick Mahomes. They're going to have that figured out before free agency kicks off around the 12th of March. and whether or not they're going to do something with Chris Jones, obviously, as well. And you would hope that they would have an answer from Travis Kelce by that point, because that way they can know going in, this is how much cap space we're going to have to be able to go after some free agents and maybe bring in some players that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. That is kind of where they are on the salary cap. And when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this roster and some potential free agents that could fit in Kansas City. So looking at the free agent list, the biggest thing that stands out to me is there are a couple of guys that they could go after at left tackle, but they're older. And it's not going to, I don't know that it's an upgrade from what they have. Is it going to be something that they're going to be able to afford and they want to go down that direction? We'll see. Ronnie Stanley is 31 years old. He is coming from the Ravens. That's a tough one. At 31, he is not Trent Williams. What Trent Williams got from an offer from Kansas City was over $20 million, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. I would imagine Stanley's going to get even more than that, and I don't know what that is going to come down to. But that is probably the position that I would think that if they're going to look for somebody, they're going to try to find a left tackle. And right now, the problem is left tackles generally don't hit the free agent market. You have Cam Robinson, you have Ronnie Stanley, Joseph Noteboom, Tyron Smith, DJ Humphries, Patrick McCarry, Jedrick Wills. I'm sorry. You just don't have any great left tackles that are going to be on the free agent list, and that's a huge problem for this team. So what does Kansas City do? They would have to be looking for a trade at that position. They would also potentially be looking at the draft. I do think that they will be at least talking to Ronnie Stanley to get an idea. The other problem that Stanley gives you is he's been injured a lot over the past several seasons. So while you could sign him for a lucrative deal and he would be a great free agent signing if he could play the entire time healthy, I don't think that you can plan that he's going to be healthy the entire time, and that's a big problem for the Chiefs. They cannot afford to have a left tackle that's going to come in and miss substantial time. I do think that that's a huge issue for them looking at any of the free agents that are out there, and I don't see any other names on this list that you really feel like would be able to step in and be anything more than serviceable. Maybe they look at adding somebody and they just bring them in and say, okay, this will get me by for another year. I don't think that that's the direction they want to go. They need to get the offensive line figured out. They need to get the left tackle position figured out. And I do think that that's going to be something they look at. Is it possible that they go with what they have already in Morris and in Suamataia? It is possible. The other possibility is that Morris and Suamataia challenge for a potentially vacated left guard or right guard spot, because both of those potentially could be vacant this year. If they cut Joe Thuney because they don't have any cap space and they don't decide to bring him back, which I don't see happening, maybe left guard is available unless he could also decide to retire. Right guard is a different one. Trey Smith, I don't see how he's back in Kansas City unless he's willing to take a little bit of a pay cut from getting top market money. And if he is, then he could be back in Kansas City, but we'll see. So when you look at the rest of the offense, I think that you have to feel pretty decent about the rest of it. Tight end is a big question because we don't know what Travis Kelce is going to do. You still need to invest in that position, but it's a little different. If he retires, maybe you go and spend a little bit of money and bring in a free agent at the tight end position. Or if he doesn't retire, maybe you go and spend a little bit of your money at the wide receiver position. Maybe you can bring Hollywood Brown back. Maybe you can bring in a running back that will help with Isaiah Pacheco, and maybe you're able to bring back a guy like Samaje Perine. I think that Perine showed he still has value and he still has the ability to do things that this roster would want. So I would make that re-signing would make a lot of sense to me. Would not shock me to see him back in Kansas City. Kareem Hunt could also be back in Kansas City, but his role's got to be a lot different and has got to be a lot more limited because I don't think he has the legs to be able to do what he did this year again in 2025. Flip it over to the other side, and that's where it's going to get real interesting because Chris Jones is your anchor. You know that. One of the other big things, and I know we're talking free agents that the Chiefs could sign, but the thing that's going to play into this as well is what do they do with Trent McDuffie? What do they do with George Karlaftis? Do they sign either of those guys to extensions because this is the first year that they could? They could do the same thing with Leo Chanel. They sign him to an extension. That would give them the opportunity to maybe move him to middle linebacker for the year, and if Nick Bolton leaves. So there's lots of different ways this could go. But the position I think that probably needs to be addressed outside of, maybe obviously Chris Jones is defensive tackle. And we've talked about this for, the past couple of seasons. It's a position they keep recycling guys through that they know. Mike Pennell's been here, Tershawn Wharton, Derek Nottie, all those guys have been here on a regular basis. Is it possible that they continue to go that direction? I would say it's possible. It's not the direction I would want them to go. If I'm them, I'm wanting to bring in somebody that can give Jones a little bit of help on the inside. I'd be okay if Wharton was able to come back, but I don't think that somebody's going to allow him to be playing in Kansas City for less than, $6, $7, $8 million a year. I just think that he had a good enough season. He gets interior pressure. I do think he's going to get a contract. I don't think it's going to break the bank, but I don't think it's going to be in the Chiefs' wheelhouse with what they've done at their defensive tackle position lately. So that's a position I would definitely look at. Another one that they could look at, they're losing Charles Omenihu. They could be looking at edge. It's a question of what do you want to spend at that position. That's going to be one of the toughest positions to fill for cheap, because you're going to be paying edge rusher is one of the premium positions in the NFL, and you're not going to be able to get out of paying for that pass rush. There's a whole lot. There's several free agents that are out there. Khalil Mack, Hassan Reddick, DeMarcus Lawrence, all those guys are out there in free agency. Chase Young, Preston Smith, Matt Judon. But are they going to be willing to come in and sign for lesser deals to play in Kansas City? I don't think so. So to me, I think that that's a position that, while it would be great to add a free agent, unless you free up a ton of cap space, I don't think you're going to be going that direction. I think that's going to be a position you're going to continue to try to draft at, as Kansas City has done the past couple of seasons. Another one that is really interesting with Nick Bolton being a free agent is, do they look at the linebacker position and say, okay, we could go out there and we could sign a guy that didn't play much in 2024 in Dre Greenlaw? Because remember, 2 years ago, Dre Greenlaw was walking onto the field for the second half in the Super Bowl and blew his Achilles. He didn't play much in 2025. He did play, but not very much. So he didn't have a lot of value in 2024. Is it possible that he could come in for a cheap contract on a prove-it deal in Kansas City and kind of take over the position that Nick Bolton was playing? I would not mind that. I think that he's a great player, but is he going to be willing to come in and play in this system for a lesser contract than maybe he could get elsewhere? I think somebody's going to be willing to give him some money. You have other guys that are going to be out there in Levante David and Isaiah Simmons. You got some guys that are up there in age, in Levante David and Bobby Wagner. I do think that Greenlaw is probably a guy I would actually consider taking a shot on if he's willing to come in for a decent deal, because I do think there's value there. And I do think that he's not going to get the contract that he wants because he didn't play in 2024. Another guy that is possible is you could bring back Willie Gay Jr. Willie Gay went to New Orleans, made $3 million in 2024, is a free agent now. They could bring him back and pay him probably about the same money he got for the Saints. But the thing is if you do that, you move people around on the linebacker position, which I'm fine with. I think that they have the ability to move guys around, and they get a lot more speed, which is what they've been missing at that position. So I do think that linebacker is a position they could definitely look at in free agency. And the one that's not going to really surprise me at all, just Kansas City, and does Brett Veach decide that they want to go and get a corner? To me, I'm not going to say that they have their answer at corner opposite of Trey McDuffie. I don't think that anybody would really say that right now. But I do think that it's possible that they look and try to bring somebody in like a vet on a small deal and see if they could get by for a season and draft somebody again, trying to find another corner that can step in and play and help in this defense. Lots of different names out there, lots of guys that are probably up there in age. But I do think that there's value. You could bring back Shavarius Ward if he's willing to play for less money. Carlton Davis is out there, Byron Murphy, Jonathan Jones, Kendall Fuller's even out there. There's lots of different guys in different ways you can go. It's how much do you want to spend? How much value do you think that those types of guys can bring to this defense and give you for 2025? Lots more to talk about in this offseason. We're going to be getting into it a lot on Locked On Chiefs in the coming days. So be sure to check that out and be sure to come back, and we will talk to you tomorrow.